welcome everyone on behalf of the HCPN, which is the Health Community Participation Network, to the workshop Storytelling and Health and Why Tell Your Story. So we've got 2 workshops coming up. So one is today on Why Tell Your Story, and then next week we've got How to Tell Your Story. My name is Anna Lemke. I'm from Mary Health, the community engagement advisor from Mary Health, and I use the pronouns she, her. Before I start us off, and I think you might have just had a window over the screen, I would like to acknowledge that we're hosting this workshop on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, and I acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians on the various land on which you all gather today, celebrating their diversity and their ongoing cultures and connection to the lands and water in Victoria and beyond. And if you would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which you meet, feel free to use the chat function below. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past and present and emerging. Noting that sovereignty is never ceded, I would like to welcome anyone who identifies as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander participating in this workshop today. And storytelling is extremely important for many Indigenous people, and unfortunately these are the stories we listen or hear the least. So I'll let you ponder on that for a little moment. So before I kick us all off properly, I would like to introduce some of our co-hosts. So I'll be hosting you throughout the day, but we have a few other people's voices you will be hearing. So I'll try to unshare my screen for a second so that people can wave to you. So we've got Betty and Neelum and Amina from joining us. So Betty is from the Eye and Ear Hospital, and then we've got Neelum and Amina from Mary Health, who are currently students. So they will be hosting us today as well, and then we will have a few facilitators with us today. They will be joining you in the breakout sessions and be taking notes and helping you along the way. So can the facilitators give us a quick wave as well? And some of the hosts are facilitators as well. So now I'll share back my screen. That worked, fantastic. And I'll hand over quickly to Amina around some housekeeping matters.
Well, thank you, Anna. Welcome, everyone. My name is Amina, and I'm a community services student, and I'm doing my work placement at Mary Health in community engagement. I'm also a new consumer advocate with Mary Health. But unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity to get engaged in anything yet. But I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of you today in this session. All right, so I'm going to go over some housekeeping today. Firstly, we'll start off with the recording. As you may have noticed, this session is being recorded, but not the breakout rooms. So once we put you in those breakout rooms to do some activities, that won't be recorded. So that's a safe space. If you don't want to be recorded, you can turn off your cameras, and the recording will be available in the coming weeks with you all and the participating health services and any consumer advocates that couldn't be here today. Zoom etiquette. So I'm pretty sure you guys have heard this many times. Can you please have your mics muted unless you're talking in your breakout rooms? If you do have a camera and you don't mind being recorded, please turn them on. We'd love to see everyone's faces, and it makes for a better experience. When it comes to questions, due to limited time today, if you could put them in the chat function, please, and a staff member will respond to you after the session. And we also highly encourage you to raise these questions during the breakout sessions. A quick technical note. I think there's someone's not on mute. A technical note: if Zoom happens to crash, you'll be put back in the waiting room. So please bear with us while we bring you back into the session. Also going to mention about respectful interactions. So please be respectful of others in your interactions and give everyone the opportunity to share in your groups. When it comes to boundaries, please be mindful of your own boundaries and respect other people's boundaries. Avoid oversharing and look after your emotional safety. We don't have the means to ground people here. So if anything upsetting does come up for you, we really encourage you to reach out to your organization contact or a service that's going to be provided later in the presentation. There'll be a list or a person that you trust. If for any reason you need to leave a breakout room, there's a red button on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen when you're in the breakout room, and you can just click on that and leave. If you want to rejoin your breakout room, once you're in the main room where we are right now, there's a breakout rooms icon on the bottom middle bar of your screen. You can click that and it'll help you go back inside your breakout room. So that's it from me for housekeeping. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. Keep us going. So today, in a nutshell, the agenda is a little bit about, we've already done the housekeeping, so we've moved that one forward. Betty will give us a bit of an update on the HCPN, which is the Health Community Participation Network, and Betty has been around for a little while, so she's in the best position to give us a bit of an update there. I'll be setting the scene for us, so just getting us into storytelling and the juices flowing a little bit. And there will be lots of networking opportunities. As Amina mentioned, there will be great breakout groups. So we will be having 2 breakout groups where you have the chance to chat to the facilitator and to each other about certain topics that we're going to provide you with, and introduce yourself and get to know some other people. And then Betty will also run the main section for us, which is obviously around why tell your story. So that will be accompanied with some lovely videos that we've picked for you. And then Nilum will finish us off all when we're ready with some of the key learnings today. So I'm handing over to Betty now on some of the background about the Health Community Participation Network. Over to you, Betty.
Thanks so much, Anna. And hello, everyone. As Anna mentioned, my name is Betty Tellis. I'm the Coordinator of Community Engagement and Participation at the Royal Victorian Eye and Ear Hospital, and I use she, hers pronouns. I'd also like to welcome you all to the first of today's storytelling in health workshops. And for those of you who aren't aware of the Health Community Participation Network, I want to give you a little bit of background about who we are and what we do. So as Anna mentioned, the network has been around for a while. It was established back in 2015. And it was established, I guess, for people in that consumer engagement role within the Northwest Metropolitan Region area. To be able to provide a collaborative space to share resources and ideas, support initiatives, and work through some challenges that we might individually be facing in our organisations. But most importantly, the network was established to also provide an opportunity for us to offer training and networking opportunities to consumer and carer representatives within our organisations. So I guess those of you who've been a consumer or care representative in your organisations for quite some time might have remembered attending face-to-face events in the past. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to host anything in person in the last couple of years due to the COVID pandemic. But that's why we thought it was even more important to be able to provide these workshops to you within this virtual platform, to be able to talk about this important topic, but also to give you an opportunity to network with others in this space, or other consumer and care representatives. So on behalf of all the Health Community Participation Network, the HCPN, it's quite a mouthful to say, we have 11 organisations currently involved in the network, including the Royal Victorian Eye and Ear Hospital, the Royal Women's Hospital, Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre, Mary Health, the Northwest Metropolitan PHN, Epworth, Northern Health, the Royal Melbourne Hospital, Co-Health, Western Health, and Your Community Health. So on behalf of all of us, we hope you enjoy the presentations and the opportunity for discussion today. And it's so lovely to see so many of you here today. Thank you. And back over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Betty. So I'll be setting the scene for us today. So we'll start talking a little bit about storytelling in a second, but a quick foreword before. I wanted to mention the word consumer, which you will be hearing, or we will be referring to this term throughout the workshop a lot, and we've already mentioned it a few times. So what we mean by the term consumer is people with past, current, and future lived experiences in health. And we also acknowledge that this word is not really perfect, and that a lot of us actually not identify with the word, and some of us might even really dislike it. But unfortunately, I can already see a hand raised. Unfortunately, there is never a term that we all identify with. So consumer is the one we're going to be using today, and is maybe the best. That could be debated. So please be with us, bear with us today. Which leads me to talk a little bit about stories and storytelling. So you all have shared stories before. It could have been with a clinician, a friend, a family member, a workmate. And sometimes it can be quite uncomfortable or exciting. It's some people say it's almost like a little bit like a coming out. Some of us have shared stories publicly, so they might feel more comfortable, like could be at a conference, committee, a community event, something like today. But one thing we have all done is we've shared stories to ourselves. So we know our little brain keeps telling us stories nonstop, and the stories or the experience we've had, we've told ourselves many times within our brains. And in many cultures, storytelling is an important and dominant way of conveying information. And it's really central to pretty much the very existence of that community. And every child learns the skills of storytelling, but also to listen to stories from very early on. And so while many communities, including the Indigenous community, as I mentioned in the acknowledgement of country, have that tradition to draw on, many of us actually don't have that. So that leads me just to another introduction to the next workshop. So on next Tuesday, there will be the workshop on how to tell the story, whereas today we will be focusing much more on the why. Next slide, there we are. So I'll scratch the surface again. That's all I'm doing here, about the history of storytelling and health. So in the past, and unfortunately even today, or too often today, the word story lacks credibility and authority. So stories are much more, or used to be seen much more as a perception, much more individual, and did not really influence services. And scientific knowledge was seen as truth, and those were the experts. And that was obviously quite distressing for the storyteller, and we've all been there many times, and we can probably all recollect a moment where we told a story and people were not as empathetic as we wanted to be. So that was the past. So fortunately, while some of this still happens today, which we need to acknowledge, this has somewhat changed over the years. So consumers are considered experts of their own life. So there's growing evidence that tells us that meaningful involvement of consumer voice is crucial to deliver health service and improve health service outcomes. So consumer stories are much more recognized these days by politicians, policymakers, and service planner, to the point that as public and community health service providers, we're actually mandated to partner with consumers, and it's really important for our accreditation. So if that ever happens in health, in hospitals or community health providers, and someone doesn't really want to listen, there will be always someone like in my position, or Betty's position, or Anna's position, or Joe's position, who you can speak to. So why? Because we know by partnering with consumers, we ensure that care is safe, of high quality, and meets people's needs. So in short, it basically improves. So we have better health outcomes, better experiences, a greater efficiency of care. So that means people won't stay at hospital for as long, or might not need the health service provider for as long. It also improves staff well-being, interestingly enough. So when you tell stories, it's not just for your fellow consumers and their journey in the healthcare system, but you're also supporting us as staff, and it reduces our emotional stress. And of course, with greater efficiency comes reduced cost. So, and it reduces the pressure on our health system. So, while considerable gains have been made in areas of consumer voice and the power of lived experience, there is still, it's not universally accepted yet. So there's still a rocky road ahead of us, and there are still many challenges and barriers and resistances, and we will speak together about this a little bit later. But generally speaking, we can say stories are much more acceptable. And while it's part of our accreditation for healthcare providers as well, there's also proof on how a good story affects our brain. So I'm going back to the scientific world, but also it is much more a fun fact. So storytelling on the brain. So when we hear a good story, actually, there are two neurochemicals released. So one is the neurochemical oxytocin, and those of us who have given birth might know this, that this is released after giving birth and bonding to the child. So this is released when we are trusted or shown kindness, and it builds empathy and therefore motivates us to cooperate with others. So very important for a baby to be born. When they cry, they want us to cooperate. Stories that are personally, emotionally compelling release more oxytocin. So that's the care, connection, and empathy. And there's cortisol, which help us focus and to be much more attentive. And that's when we hear a bit of a sad and distressing story. So we are therefore able to better remember these stories, and much more than if someone would just name facts, for example. So in summary, what it means that we can feel the story, we can remember a story, and therefore engage with the story more, which ultimately leads us to take action. Thank you. And I'm handing over to Amina, right?
Thanks, Anna. All right, now to the fun part. We are going to be doing a warm-up activity with you all. So you'll be put in breakout rooms and you'll have about 20 minutes. And what we'd like you to do is to introduce yourselves and also share one or two reasons why you think we need to share stories. And when you introduce yourself, what we would like you to include is your name, the organization or health service that you're part of, how long you've been a consumer advocate or rep in that organization. And we thought we'll throw in something fun in there. What's your favorite ice cream flavor? I know it's hard for me to choose. The activity instructions will be put in the chat function in your breakout room. And each person will be sharing for a few minutes each. So we do only have 20 minutes. When time is nearly up, a pop-up window will be displayed of how much time is left, and there'll be a countdown. If you've got any issue getting into a breakout room, there will be someone here in this main room where we are now to help you out. All right, so enjoy.
I first told my story at the launch of the Survivorship Centre 10 years ago. So 10 years on from telling my original story, there have been so many new advances. And I was invited with the 10th anniversary of the Survivorship Centre to retell my story. I have become, I suppose, a bit of a spokesperson and an advocate for cancer survivors. And for me, it's a passion that I have to make the cancer journey something better for today's cancer patients and survivors than mine was. None of these things were available all those years ago, and there are still gaps in the system, and I guess I feel that my work is important to try and fill those gaps.
The Possum Skin Cloak is part of the women's healing process.
Possum Skin Cloak was a project that we did in partnership with Breast Cancer Network Australia, and the project was around cultural safety and how a health service can ensure cultural safety for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander patients.
My mum wrapped it around her when she was very sad, and it helped heal their soul when she was sad, being away, long way from home, and it healed her over time. And just keeping that Possum Skin Cloak has healed my mum throughout the 2 months that we've been through this process.
Understanding the importance of the cloak and how it's being used is really important for us, but it's also important for the wider health sector to understand the importance of cultural safety and to actually embark on these projects which are specifically around supporting our First Nations people to feel culturally safe in accessing health care.
To the ladies who made it, I know the ladies, and thank you very much for making that cloak, because it means a lot in the culture, and we come from a long way, and it's great to have that connection here in Yarrabee.
I actually didn't know I was a carer until I was in year 11, and that was when everything changed. I got so much support, I got so much guidance.
My message to young carers is to make sure that you care for yourself, because you are a very important person in the process of helping your loved ones out.
I think the most important thing I'd say to young carers is you're not alone.
There's always someone that will listen. Hard as it might be to find them, there's always someone that will listen.
Medicos have their specialities and their knowledge, but I felt I needed to be part of that making decision, because the decision I was making is going to affect me on so many levels. It wasn't just cutting a little lump out of my arm. We're talking about erectile dysfunction, not being able to have sex like you used to, incontinence pads, the whole trauma of the whole operation at the time. So I need to be really informed so that I made the decision that was best for me at the time, and of course the family as far as the wife. So having that Navigate website, clicking the information, weighing up the pros and cons of each one, and then deciding which treatment I was considering at the time would have made it a lot easier, reduced a lot of angst, of anxiety, the unsureness of am I making the right decision. So the videos have been uploaded again about men who've been down the different treatment options and why they came to that decision, how it's affected them, including men who decided not to take a treatment but have gone on to active surveillance. And it's also, you get to hear about their partners. So again, you're not listening to actors, you're listening to men who've been down that road, who've had to wear the information and deal with the side effects. So it's important they get to hear. They don't have to go and do a support group. They can sit in the comfort of their own home. They can go up and down through all the different videos depending on what treatment they're considering, and review it constantly without being interjected at by men at the group maybe. Some men aren't comfortable going to support groups, so the men and their partners can sit in the room, watch the videos, stop it, talk about it, think about questions, or how am I going to deal with this next, or make questions for their medico when they go back and see them. So it's a really important aspect of the Navigate website, which as far as I know is not available anywhere else. So it's a real first, and I think it's fantastic.
So as we wait to bring it back to the slides, fantastic, thank you, Anna. And we'll just go on to the next slide, please, as well. What you would have noticed in that video montage, but also within your breakout sessions and within all of our workshop attendees today, is that consumer and carer representatives come from all walks of life, different ages, different genders, different cultural backgrounds and skills and experience. But even through all that diversity, you do share some very important common traits. And that is, first and very important one is that you all have a story to tell, and that story is powerful in whatever shape or form that it takes. But also, and another thing that I reflect in having just briefly run through your pre-survey questionnaires, your motivation to tell your story comes from an inbuilt need or want to help other people. And I think that everyone has the potential to motivate others, to raise awareness, to educate, to empower and to inspire change, not only for yourselves, but for other members in your community. So if we go on to the next slide. The stories we witnessed in that video montage today is about sharing that lived experience for those consumers and carer representatives. And to me, that really started to create an emotional connection. And that's something that Anna talked about a little bit in her session as well. We're really invited to share the feelings behind these people's stories. And again, we talk about the physiological response. So we feel that in here, but we also feel it up here. And that's the what Anna was talking about, of how the stories connect to what we're feeling, what we're experiencing physically. So if we go to the next slide, talk about different motivations of why people share their story. A lot of the time it's about appreciation or showing one's appreciation about a particular journey that you've had a positive experience for. But the flip side of that, of course, is sometimes things don't work out the way that they're supposed to, or there are gaps in the system, and we share our stories to be able to inspire change and improvement for that. So it actually provides, I guess, opportunities for growth for ourselves, or for different experiences for ourselves, but definitely for other people as well. So if we reflect back to what our consumers and carers were talking about in that montage that we just saw, we heard from Meg, who shared her story to let others know that they are not alone. And Meg reflected on the fact that at a time when she was going through her journey, these stories weren't around, and she really definitely saw a gap, and she was able to share her story to bridge that gap. We also heard from Ronald about his story, and I guess being able to raise awareness for his community about the possum skin cloak, and the fact that, I guess, having the possum skin cloak available provides an opportunity to experience that journey in a cultural safe space, but also to connect spiritually to that experience for his mob. We heard, or we saw, our young carer animations, and I think this one's really important for me, and it came up a bit in our breakout session, or my breakout session today, about representation and advocacy. And sometimes there are groups that we don't always hear from, or whose voices we don't always hear, and that's really important for them to be able to have that space to talk about their stories and to talk about how their needs might be different to others. And last but definitely not least, we heard from Alan, who talked a little bit about the different options he had in his journey and his experience, and empowering other people to understand that we don't have a one-size-fits-all situation in health. We can pick and choose depending on what's right for us, and we are the experts in our own lived experience, and we make those decisions that's going to fit for ourselves, but our families and our personal little network. So I guess the other thing that I wanted to talk about here is a personal reflection about when consumers talk to me about sharing their stories. A lot of the time people say to me, but Betty, I don't really think I have anything really important to say, or it's just my normal experience. This is something that is just a part of me. But what my answer always is to that is that just because it is a lived experience, or just because it's an experience that you take as normal or status quo, that doesn't mean it's not a story that's not worth sharing, because sharing that story could definitely help people who are in a different part of their journey, who might be questioning things, might not necessarily have the same courage or the ability to speak up, and hearing your story can definitely make a big difference for them. So if I go back to, I don't know if I gave my little gardening analogy before, but from little things, big things definitely grow. So the next slide, we talk about, I guess, the health service perspective and what we think about as a health service when we think about sharing stories and the importance of sharing stories. And I go back to this concept that Anna introduced in the beginning of this session, and that's about partnering with consumers and carers. You are obviously the experts in your own lived experience, and it's really important to acknowledge that experience and that part that you bring to the table is just as important as the clinical experience or expertise that is brought to the table. So each puzzle piece comes together to bring the picture in focus, and each piece is just as important as the other. We also think about the fact that, and I think Anna also mentioned this in her presentation, about the fact that we really need to listen to people's experiences in accessing our services, because if there's something that if there's a place where we're falling short, we need to be able to make sure that our services are meeting the needs of the people that we are servicing. So if there's something that we could be doing better, we definitely need to be able to listen to those people who can actually say, oh, hey, you could be doing this in a much better way, and that can improve my experience in that situation. The other way I look at this is the fact that as working as in the consumer engagement space, I find it very important to be able to give the opportunity or give consumers a platform in which to share their stories in order to raise awareness. Now that's awareness around, it can be about conditions, about issues, about uptaking services, it could be about treatments, it could be about supports. Alan talked about this in his story, and he talked about, I think he said, clinician speak. And that really resonates with me, because I think sometimes, yes, clinicians have the best of intentions, but sometimes I guess patients or consumers can't always relate to the message that's been delivered. So I feel that when we share stories from a consumer perspective, it gives people an opportunity who might be questioning or unsure about whether to reach out or to actually engage with the support service. It gives them the story from a person who they can relate to. They might not be able to relate to all aspects of that person's characteristics, but they're sharing an experience which is similar to their own. And I think by doing that, we can help work for better health outcomes for everyone. So I guess to sum up this slide, I think that, and a lot of people talked about this in our breakout session as well, is about storytelling as a powerful tool, not just for yourself, because definitely for yourself, because a lot of the time people use it as a tool for helping others, but it's also a tool to help yourself, and it provides a learning opportunity for people in your community, but definitely also for the health service. So if we go to the next slide, I'm sure you'll all agree that in the discussions you've had in your breakout sessions, and also the things that I've mentioned today, and in the video montage that we just saw, there are very important reasons why we share our story in health. Some of these things you might have already known, but we hope that we also have given you little other things to ponder and to think about, some things that you might not have necessarily known about. But that being said, there are still barriers that stand in our way. And I've just listed a few on the slide here. It's around confidence, fear, or privacy and accessibility. Not everyone has a love of public speaking, and particularly in bigger forums like this one, where you don't necessarily know the people that you're speaking to. Also, there's a lot of fear around telling your story and potentially being judged. People might think, well, if she's telling her story, she's not necessarily coping. And there could be a lot of stigma around that, but also around the fact that, you know what, if I share my story because my health service hasn't done the right thing by me, the care that I receive might change as well. Other aspects of sharing story or the barriers could be around privacy. Not everyone wants to be identified in that space. And particularly around accessibility. We talked about our young carers, and I guess other stories from people or from groups where not always hear those voices, and sometimes it's a bit hard for them to find the platform or the forum in which, or to be able to access platforms and forums to share those stories. So I guess today, in our next breakout session that we're going to go into, what I want you to do is reflect on your own experiences of the barriers that you've come across in sharing your story, or what stood in your way. Because in the pre-survey questionnaire, there are a few of you out there who haven't yet shared their story. So what stopped you from sharing your story? And we'd like to see if you can workshop in your groups what some opportunities to overcome those barriers. In particular, this slide, I guess, reminds us to think about how your health service can support you to share your story and overcome some of those barriers. So I think we've got just under maybe 20 minutes to look at these particular questions, and we'll take.
We've got
15. Okay, cool. So 15 minutes to get back into our groups and talk about these, and then we'll come back for our wrap-up session in the end. So I won't talk any more about this, and we'll go straight back into the groups. Group 5, I'll see you soon.
You got back quick. See this?
I think I was trying to send a message to Amina, and I think it just knocked me out.
Happened to me. Yeah, it happened to me in a meeting once. I just accidentally clicked it. I was like, oh my God, I'm leaving. But we're finishing off now anyway, so you won't be missing too much.
Thanks for this presentation today, Anna.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us as well. Welcome back, everyone, in the main room. We're just waiting for a couple more people because you have around 60 seconds to leave. So I think we should be all back now. So I'm handing over to Nilum, who will be doing a little bit of a wrap-up session for us because we're reaching the end of today as well. Nilum, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Fantastic.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Nilum. I'm a student placement at Mary Health. We appreciate your participation on today's event. Now we have almost come to the end of our workshop. Today, at the beginning, we talked about history of storytelling versus professional knowledge and how storytelling can affect the function of your brain, the hormones. Then in our first breakout activity, we discussed about the importance of storytelling. We talked about this from both consumers and carers' perspective, as well as from health services perspective. From consumers and carers' perspective, it will empower others to share their stories, inspire change and improvement in the system. And it also gives an appreciation when you share your lived experience. From health services perspective, it gives opportunity to improve service delivery and to connect with other consumers. Furthermore, it gives an opening to promote and educate about other services. In our second breakout activity, we talked about the barriers and challenges that you come across when you share your stories, and we discussed how to overcome these barriers and challenges. We also talked about what support that we can get from your health services to overcome these barriers and challenges. And finally, we would like to know what is your key take-home message from today's workshop. Please type your answer to the chat function and feel free to check on what others have written too. in your Zoom window, the chat function is into the third from the third icon from the bottom left. Yeah.
So can you see it? It's down here at the bottom. I'm trying to circle it with my mouse. I'm not sure if you can see actually my arrow. So if you have any key takeaway messages, please enter them today. Or what was your favorite bit? That would be amazing. Thank you, Neelam, and everyone.
Yeah, it is really great about listening to other people's stories, and it creates an emotional connection, and it's very powerful. That's some of the messages, and the people, of course, want to hear the story, and it empowers them as well to share their stories. And these are a few of the messages, and it's really great to see these messages coming up. And we also would like to remind that these feedback would be shared in a report, in a final report among everyone who participated today, and also with those who couldn't join in as well. I would pass to Anna. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And what wonderful feedback. And I'm quite delighted to hear that it's not just ice cream flavors in there, that you've learned of new ice cream flavors, but also a little bit about storytelling, which brings us pretty much to the end. And I want to thank you for some of the technical glitches. At least the internet didn't let us down, which happened just before the workshop today. So my adrenaline levels were already fairly high up. It's like, please don't let me down. So thank you on behalf of the HCPN, so the Health Community Participation Network. I hope you really enjoyed today. If anything distressing has come up today, please talk to your health service representative or organizational contact who might be here today, or feel free to talk to family members, a friend, or someone you feel comfortable with. If none of the above applies to you, or you don't want to, there's that slide with Lifeline Australia had help as well, and we'll leave that open towards the end. So if you would want to jot down the numbers later on, that will be available towards the end. A quick reminder and intro. So the idea and act of sharing stories may seem fairly straightforward, but many of us have experienced sharing our stories, have found that there are many things that we actually need to think about. And that will be addressed in our second workshop on the 30th of November, same time as today, 12:30 to 2 p.m. At Zoom. Same link, by the way. It's a great thing of a reoccurring meeting. It gave me some challenges in terms of breakout groups, but at least you can use the same link if you would like to join. For that workshop coming up, we need a pre-evaluation survey, and because we're all in community engagement as staff here, we also want an evaluation survey to be completed after this workshop, because we want to obviously see whether we've created a little bit of impact, and we can do that by understanding how you felt before about storytelling and the why of a story, and then afterwards. As Amina mentioned before, we will be sharing the video in the upcoming weeks and the breakout notes. I've noticed while I was hanging back here, while you were all in the breakout group, that I've been filmed the entire time along, and we will be cutting that bit out, because I don't think you want to look at me for 20 minutes while everyone was chatting. If you have any questions now unanswered or for the end, a few of us will be sticking around, so feel free to ask these questions. We will be probably around for another 15-20 minutes. So I'll leave you with this little slide. Thank you so much for joining us today, and just as a quick note, everyone has a story to tell, so it doesn't matter whether it's big or small. Here's the lifeline slide and the head help slide if you want to jot down the numbers. And I hope we see you all next week in another round of wonderful workshops presented by Anna, Alicia, and Joel, who joined us today as well. Thank you all.